had this thought, and it was like a weird thought for me. And it was, what do old people do who don't have anyone to look after them?
You had that thought at like 20.
Yeah. And it was like, I think my first truly compassionate thought ever in my whole life.
Wow.
To that point.
I'm super blessed to be here with a woman I've gotten to know for the past like year and a half. Her name is Julie Cairns, and I got to know her in the business world. I participate in a kind of business mastermind coaching program where she is one of the leaders of that. And over the past couple of years, I'd heard she's a really good businesswoman and she's done these business things and learned that she was very, very special. But on this trip, I learned that she's really amazing in a way that I want you to hear. Now, I could sit here and tell you all of the things that make her special and appropriate to be like a leader in the business world. You've had some remarkable entrepreneurial successes and have made, you know, the type of money where you don't have just one comma, there's another comma to put in there. And you've written a book called The Abundance Code about people having an abundant mindset and turn that book into a movie. And I mean, she's done all of these things that it's not hard to convince you that she should be someone that you listen to when she talks about business and entrepreneurship and mindset. But what I learned this weekend that I did not know is her heart is just as special as her business acumen. And I'm really excited because I want to ask you about that part of your story. What we do here is I get really fascinated about people. Like I've learned in my years that no successful person didn't have a mountain to climb. And in the past few years, as I work on my own business success and those things, I spend my time around more business people, and I realize like money is not the thing that brings happiness and joy. And in talking to you this weekend, you could easily say like, I'm so excited about these professional things, but what actually like lights you up is falling back in love with your high school sweetheart. Like, see, look at the smile that she has just saying it. But the journey to get there is what I want people to hear, because I think sometimes people think it just kind of like accidentally happens and those things, but you've been on one heck of a journey that started in high school, and so much like love and acceptance and learning to get you there. So I just told you guys the end of the rainbow, which is back in love with high school sweetheart 35 years later. But I want to ask you about some steps along the journey. So my first question is, why didn't it work out in high school?
Well, nothing to do with him. Everything to do with me, which is pretty much the first thing I said to him when he got back in touch with me after 35 years. It was like, hey, by the way, I am so sorry, because I dumped him back then. And I was like, I am so sorry. That was nothing to do with you. That was my stuff. And what my stuff was at that time was, in many ways, I had a good family. And I'm not ungrateful for my family, but the family dynamics were very dysfunctional. And there was, you know, alcoholism and just, I'm not going to call it abuse, but like unfortunate psychological conditioning. Let's say that.
Right.
Some just really, really toxic relationship patterns that my parents had learned. And look, it's an intergenerational thing, and it just is what it is, was what it was, and it was dysfunctional and toxic a lot of the time. So I came into that relationship where he had a wonderfully functional family, wonderfully functional. His parents are kind, wonderful people. He has, there's three boys in his family. They all get along. I never witnessed a fight between any of them. You know, and I came into that environment and I actually didn't know what it was. I didn't know what's going on here? Like, I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. When is the screaming argument about to happen? You know, and then after realizing it's not going to happen, they're not going to have a fight, it's not going to get toxic, what even is this? What came up in me was like, oh my God, I don't even belong here, and they're going to find out that I don't belong here. And I just had this really intense sort of imposter syndrome thing come up. And so my reaction to that at the time was, I'm just not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell him, and I'm not going to tell them any of the stuff that happened in my childhood, any of the stuff that's currently going on at home that was doing my head in at the time. I'm just not going to share any of it. So I just started stuffing it all down. In an intimate relationship, that's not healthy. Right? And so this distance just started to open up between us around all the things I was not telling him, and was vowing to myself that I was never going to tell him, because I was sure he would reject me if he knew those things. And eventually I just distanced myself so far I couldn't feel anything. And then I broke up with him because I couldn't feel anything.
Right.
And that was very devastating to him, I think. And we basically didn't have much contact for the next 35 years.
So I have a ton of questions. My first question is actually kind of about your professional success. You use the phrase imposter syndrome, and you come from this family where there's like intergenerational unhealthy patterns. So one of the things that I find remarkable is, how do you come out of that childhood as someone who can be such a leader professionally and accomplish the things you've accomplished? Most people go through that and they don't become Julie Cairns. Like, what was it about you, do you think, allowed you to come out of that childhood? We're going to get to the relationship thing in a minute. But I'm so interested in your own like inherent resilience. Like, how did you go through that and have the self-esteem or the confidence or the strength, whatever it was, that allowed you to start accomplishing things that oftentimes, I mean, I'm sure you know, a lot of times when people come through a childhood like that, they're more likely to become alcoholics and make bad parenting decisions or become parents young and all of the things. And you have gone on to be a remarkable professional. And I just want to know how.
Well, first of all, I don't want to paint an overly rosy picture, because I did all the things. I did the binge drinking. I did have addictions. I did have unhealthy behaviors that I,
But to me, that makes the picture even rosier, because in spite of all of that, this happened, you know?
Yeah. So if I was to pinpoint the key thing, I guess, in my family system, my role in the family system was the scapegoat. And so, I kind of view that now as a blessing in a way, because it got to the point where it was so bad that I placed a boundary, just because I couldn't continue to exist with that level of, crap being directed my way in the family system, and always being the one who was, wrong and not okay, and, not, no matter what I did. And the weirdest thing about that is I was a straight A student, and I was a competitive gymnast. And, I was like turning myself inside out to try and live up and not be the scapegoat. And it just never worked. So eventually I got to the point where I'm like, I'm out, right? And I placed a boundary and said, I got to not talk to you guys for a while. And I went not long after I placed that boundary, and I got a scholarship to go to Japan, and I went and I lived in Japan for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't have a lot of contact with my family during that time. And it was during that 5 years that I was able to just kind of heal and rebuild. And I, had people around me going, you're actually quite smart, and met people, my own age who seemed to like me and weren't dumping on me. And I was able to get enough distance to finally go, you know what, all those things you were telling me, they're just lies. They're lies. And I don't know I would have got there without the distance, without, pulling myself out of it and getting the perspective.
This is going to be a hard question, mostly because I imagine you hadn't thought about this in this way, but I think it's so important, I'm going to push. What did you draw upon to get through that period? Because, you're, at the time, I don't know, probably 18 or so, if I had to guess.
20. Yeah.
Alone, and you go to a country that you've never been. You stay for longer than a weekend, and you just described it as like, in that time I was able to discover like those things you're telling me were lies, they weren't true, and I'm actually quite smart. But like the thought of like moving to a random country as a young alone woman, what did you draw upon within you to do that? Because that's not easy. So like, what did you like reach in and get that helps you do that?
To get to Japan
and
to stay there.
And not only to get there, but to stay there and then do this incredibly difficult emotional work.
Yeah.
While doing that. Like, I'm a psychotherapist. It is not uncommon that people will have a realization similar to the one you must have had. Like, you people are unhealthy, you're really toxic, and I need to create space and distance. That's not uncommon. That does not make you special. Where you become special is two things. You took action, like, you people are unhealthy, I need space and distance, and you like created oceans between. And the second thing you did where you became special is oftentimes people will come to me and they will say, I know my dad is unhealthy, my mom is unhealthy, what have you. And I told them, I can't speak to you for a while. I need to da-da-da. And then that is such an intense missing. It's such an intense void that they usually go back to the toxic person because the distance was so hard.
Right.
And now you're telling me, at about 20, I went across the world and I held firm to what I needed. And I want to know how. I want to know what is in your DNA, what is inside of you that allowed you to do that? Because most of the time people come to my office because I know my dad is unhealthy. I know my mom is unhealthy. We had this big blow-up fight and I told them, I can't be around you for a while, I need to heal. But within a month, the void, even if it's an unhealthy thing, it's still a void.
Yeah.
And the void created is so intense, I went back to the unhealthy thing. But at 20, you did not do that. Help me understand.
Okay.
What's in
now
there?
we're getting into the spiritual realm.
That's,
if I really
for
am
sure.
honest, right?
I want to, how did you do that?
Yeah. Well, the quick answer is I did not do that on my own.
Okay.
I didn't do that on my own. So I can trace the pivotal experience to I went for a hike on this Buddhist mountain that had 108 Buddhist statues. And I stopped at every Buddhist statue. And this one particular one just captured my attention. And I didn't even know anything about Buddhism, right? Like nothing. And so it was a tiny little statue, and it was a Buddha that was holding a baby that had babies at its feet, right? And in my ignorance, I thought, that's female. Like this is a female icon, even though the Buddha was bald and everything. For some reason, I just thought that's a woman. That's a nurturing mother energy. And my whole being just went, oh God, I want that. I want that. I want to be mothered. I want to be nurtured. I want to be held and feel like I'm safe and like I'm loved, and I don't have to, when a baby is loved, they don't have to do anything. They don't have to prove anything. They don't have to, like, literally as a child, I was doing somersaults, like literally doing somersaults for approval.
Right.
Right? And still not kind of getting it, right? Whereas a baby just gets this unconditional love. And I really had this longing for that. So I took a photo of this statue, and then I went home and I drew it. And I spent 3 weeks drawing it. And it was like a meditation. I'd spend hours on this thing, and I just had this longing exuding from every pore of my body of, I want mothering, I want nurturing, I want someone to give me that. I desperately need that to heal this void that you're talking about.
Right.
Right? The void was so palpable to me, and I knew some nurturing had to come in there, or I wasn't gonna hold firm, right? Mm-hmm. And then about 6 months later, a friend of mine said to me, I want you to come and meet this spiritual teacher. Her name's Amma, and she hugs people. And I want you to just come and get a hug. And so I traveled to Tokyo, and I had some hugs with Amma, and didn't really experience anything at first. And I had 3 or 4 hugs, and on the last one, she just really looked into my eyes. And she was, she hugs people, so you get on your knees. She's in a chair, you get on your knees and go into her bosom, basically, and she holds you and rocks you and whispers stuff in your ear. And she looked into my eyes, and as she was looking into my eyes, I was like, you have that mothering energy. You have that thing I was calling for. Mm. And you're giving it to me right now, and I'm receiving it right now. It's going to make me cry. I'm receiving it. I'm really receiving it. After that hug, I went and sat at the side of the stage, and I was gone. I was in a deep meditation. That I wasn't a meditator. Just spontaneously, I was gone off in another realm. And after that experience, in my neediness, before that experience, I didn't really think about other people very much. I have to admit, I was always in that I'm seeking validation. How can I impress you? What can I do? And after that, she just filled this void in this really amazing way. And after that, I remember on the flight home, I had this thought, and it was a weird thought for me. And it was, what do old people do who don't have anyone to look after them?
You had that thought at 20.
Yeah. And it was I think my first truly compassionate thought ever in my whole life.
Wow.
To that point.
Wow. What'd you do next?
A lot of growth, a lot of crying, a lot of shedding of old skin, a lot of redefining and reconfiguring to become a person who was not needy, who was herself loving and capable of giving back.
What was that like for you to be aware that you're becoming a version of yourself that was caring and loving and giving? What was that like for you?
Unfamiliar. Yeah, weird at first.
Were you pleased about it?
No, not at first.
How come?
A lot of stuff came up, Elliott. A lot of old stuff that I had stuffed in a box, did not want to look at, to be honest.
So again, I'm going to ask you, what did you draw upon within you to look at that stuff in that box that I did not want to look at? What did...
At first I didn't. At first, that was really when that stuff started to come up, that I had a bit of a spiral. And I started binge drinking and doing unhealthy behaviors, and also went into workaholism. I did great in my studies. I was studying in Japan. Mm-hmm. I did a master's degree, and that workaholism really helped me,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Excel in what I was doing, but I was really doing a whole bunch of avoidant behaviors. And it took me about 5 years to get to the point where I was willing to open that box and dig through it.
And once you did, what did you draw upon?
I drew upon the love of my guru, Amma, who was always there for me. And, you know, I just kept going back and getting hugs. And going back and getting hugs. And
like no advice or it's just hugs?
it really wasn't about advice.
Just hugs.
It was really just about the unconditional love that she was putting out. I didn't need advice. I needed love.
So, you know, when we sat down, I had no idea. You had never shared that with
Right.
me. I had no idea. But I tell people all the time that, like, love is the single most powerful force on this planet. And for people who grew up without that kind of love, it doesn't even really matter where it comes from. Like, that's how powerful of a force love is. And I want to talk about your love. I want to talk about this 35-year-old dormant love, if I could refer to it as that has now come back into your life. Because I also know that wasn't your, like, it's not like you've been single for 35 years. Like, there was a relationship.
I did get married. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that marriage and how it's going now with your ex? Because I think that says something, like, to keep, like, love is just such a powerful force. And in order to receive it, you have to be open to it. And I want you to share a little bit about your ex-partner, because I think without your openness in the way you're currently loving this person, I'm not sure you have the capacity to love your new partner in the same way, because they both require such an open heart. So would you talk a bit about that relationship, because it leads into the next, I think.
So my ex-husband, I met on the dance floor of a gay nightclub where I was at this nightclub. I used to love to go to gay nightclubs because at this time in my life when we met, I was trying to be single. But I loved to go out dancing. And so gay nightclubs were a great place where no one was hitting on me. I was like invisible. Good music. And I could just dance and have a great time. So that's where I was this night. And I turn around on the dance floor, and there's this woman, trans woman, in a beautiful ball gown. And I say to her, "You look gorgeous. You look amazing. We're dancing. We're having a good time." And then we come off the dance floor, and I notice Canadian accent. I grew up in Canada. So we start chatting about that.
And you're in
I'm in Australia
at the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's right. I moved to Australia when I was about 16.
Okay.
And it turns out that she also had grown up in Canada and moved to Australia when she was about 16. And so we have very similar background. We're chatting away about that. And I ask her, "So what do you do?" And she says, "Well, I'm a kept woman. And my other half works all week. And then I go out on the weekend and I party." Right? And I think, okay, so she's actually a man. She's like, I didn't know what a trans woman was. This is a long time ago, and I was ignorant.
Right.
And so I thought she was a drag queen, and she had a sugar daddy, and she was just openly saying all this, and I'm like, okay, no problem. I've got, a new friend. This is a fascinating person. Same background as me. I'd like to know you better. Here's my phone number, right? From their point of view, really what their reality was transgender, living their life as a man most of the time. That was my other half, works all week as a man.
Yeah.
And then going out socially as a woman. And so we started hanging out. And after about the third or fourth meeting, I was like, "You're not gay, are you?" And they said, I'm using they as the
Which will make sense in a
gender-neutral
minute.
pronoun.
Which will make sense in a second.
they said, what made you think that?
Well, gay nightclub.
Gay nightclub for starters. Right. So they kind of got under my radar, I think. And they are a beautiful person. And yeah, I fell in love with them, and then we ended up getting married. When we were making the commitment, I was a little hesitant because I was like, well, are you going to transition? Not that if that's your path, I fully support you in that path. I don't have anything, any judgments about that path. But I'm a heterosexual woman, and I think it might be an issue if you transition just from the point of view of our, sexual compatibility and relationship. So we had that conversation very early on, and they said, no, I want to continue living my life as a man most of the time. I have a business, and I like doing that. We ended up becoming business partners. And I don't think I'm going to transition. I want to have a family. I want to have kids, and I want to get married, and I want to marry you. So, yeah, so we did. And then about 7 years into the marriage, we did have a child. They started to get depressed. And I noticed that, of course, when you have a partner who's depressed, it can't not affect the relationship. And we ended up going to counseling, and it sort of came out in counseling that really they wanted to transition. So, yeah, I had to accept. I was upset, and that was a total. I often think in a breakup, sometimes the most devastating thing is letting go of the dreams that you constructed for the future.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
So I had to let go of some things about the way I thought my life was going to go and how things were going to roll, and recognize that was not going to happen. And they really did need to transition for their mental health and their happiness. And I did not take precedence over that.
This question is eventually going to annoy you. But what did you draw upon to do that?
Well, it was an incredibly stressful time. Other things were going on. Someone was actually blackmailing us in our business about the fact that he was transgender, they were transgender. That was going on. We weren't ready to tell the whole world because of our daughter. We didn't, we wanted to manage the situation with our daughter. So
someone found out.
Someone found out and was blackmailing us.
Give me money or I'm telling the world kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Wow.
That was going on. Our daughter got very sick with a mystery kind of illness and nearly died. And then she got appendicitis and nearly died again. And it's partly the stress of all that made them go, also, I've got to transition. Right? So I do remember having a moment where I just got on my knees in front of my altar, because I'm quite a spiritual person now. And I just said, God, I'm not going to ask you to take this away. I'm not going to ask you to change this, but I'm going to ask you to give me the strength to get through it.
But why? I'm a psychotherapist, trust me. 99% of the people fall down on their knees. That's not what makes you special. Lots of people fall down on their knees, but almost no one asks to give me the strength to go through it. Like, I'm not going to ask you to change it, but give me the strength to go through it. Where did you get that wisdom? Like, where does that come from? Because it's so special. It's so unique. People fall down on their knees and ask. People call me the psychotherapist and they say, tell my husband that not now, or not take the problem away.
Yeah.
You did the exact opposite. You prayed for strength and not change. Tell me why.
No one has ever asked me that question before, Elliott.
But to me, that's the whole point of this human journey. And I spend a lot of years traveling the world teaching psychotherapists. And psychotherapists, get themselves into trouble because they think they're supposed to fix people's problems. And I have to tell them, some problems are not fixable. The fix is building the endurance to go through it.
Yeah.
And how did you know that? You know what I mean? As this person, daughter got really ill twice, and this blackmailing thing happening, and grieving, because that's what happens, is like we grieve the future we thought we had. And you fell down on your knees and asked for strength. How did you know to do that?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I find that unsatisfactory. But to me, that's where your magic is, I think. I think if there's one thing I want people watching this video to get is like your heart. And like I said when we started, I was told about you in terms of business success, but I now don't give a shit about that. I don't think that's nearly as important, because I think what makes you so cool is like what you just said, like they are going through all of this and I don't take precedence over that. When you previously described yourself as like a really selfish, self-centered kind of person in your youth, fast forward and you're now like, this is going to suck, but I have to support them. That's what makes Julie special. I think the books and the movie and the business success are really cool, but has nothing on your ability to love the people around you through difficult times. What is your relationship like with them now?
Wonderful. I love them. They have transitioned, and we went through the whole journey of, transitioning with our child. I worked with a child psychologist, told her when she was about 8, and then gave her 3 years to get used to it inside the family container before it was public to the outside world. We had a press release, did the whole thing in our business. We ended up getting approached by one of the major networks in Australia to do a story on the transition. And, we really wanted there to be a positive story about gender transition. Not just, a lot of people have positive gender transition stories for themselves, but one that showed that the family can be supportive, the family can be accepting, and just model that, I guess, for other people and give them hope that they can transition and not necessarily lose their whole family in the process.
Right.
So that ended up being watched. It was like the equivalent of 60 Minutes, I guess.
Right.
And that ended up being watched by 1.5 million people in Australia. And then it got shared around the transgender community around the world. And I believe it did give people a lot of hope. And we still get feedback about that story. So,
what difference does that make to you to know that you've given hope to that global community?
I love that. I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud of us.
And if I tell you, Julie, that I believe you have saved lives, because the transgender community has among the highest suicide rates of any group on the planet, what difference does it make to you to know that you have saved at least one life? Someone did not commit suicide because they watched your story.
Yeah, I believe that.
What does that do to you to know that?
I love that. That's my why. That's my why.
Can I ask you about your current partner? Boyfriend. Can I call him boyfriend?
Yes.
What's his name?
Gareth.
So how did Gareth come back into the picture?
Well, Facebook. I came up on his People You Might Know thing on Facebook. And he reached out to me. And we were on, he was in Australia, I was in New Zealand at the time, and everybody was locked down with COVID. So for a long time, it was just...
So this is super recent. This is...
2021.
Right.
End of 2020, that sort of time. Yeah.
And who made the first move
well, he literally just reached out and, hey, how you going?
Right.
And the conversation just...
Young people call that sliding into my DMs. So like he slid into your DMs.
Yeah. And, it was just really a very innocent catch-up. But one of the first things that I did was to say, hey, way back when I broke up with you and you didn't know why, and there was no reason, there was no fight, it was, from his point of view, incredibly confusing. And why did this girl just walk away from me for no reason when there was nothing wrong in the relationship, and there really wasn't. And so one of the first things I did was say, hey, none of that was anything to do with you, and I'm really sorry. And, there was a reason for it, and this is the reason from my point of view, but I'm really sorry you got caught up in that.
And how long did it take the two of you to become romantic again?
Quite a while. We talked for, in different countries. And just kind of, there was 35 years of stuff to catch up on.
Right.
So we were just having conversations about life and what had happened in between in those 35 years.
And I guess the question that I'm leading up to, what I really want to ask you is, how did you know you were ready to love him properly this time? You know what I mean? Like, how did you know you were ready to give him a piece of you that you weren't ready to give 35 years prior?
Well, I guess I had learned that I couldn't hold a part of myself back and have a truly intimate relationship. When I say intimate, I don't mean physical intimacy. I mean, like, I'm going to let you all the way in to my whole self, everything that's going on inside me type of intimacy. I'm not going to hide a piece or section a piece off, which is what I always used to do, out of shame.
Right.
I'm not going to show you this piece is too bad. And I'm just going to hide that too, and that one goes under the bed, and,
Right.
After a while, it's like, well, you only get this tiny sliver of who I really am, and it's really hard to sustain a relationship when you're doing that, I think.
You're significantly more impressive. Because, before we did this, I didn't tell you what question I was going to ask, and 90% of what you said I didn't know about you. But so now I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you one last question. Because I now believe your heart is what makes you special. And I'm going to make a huge assumption that I probably should check in. And if this doesn't go well, I'm going to have my camera guy edit it out. I'm going to make the assumption that what makes you so successful professionally is that same heart. So if I came to you, because people come to you for coaching, people come to you and say, Julie, I've got this idea, I've got this business, I want to launch this thing. And part of your role is to help them do that successfully. If someone came to you and said, I've got this business, this idea, this thing I want to do, and my heart's not really in it, do you think they could be successful?
No.
See, I had no idea I would think this, but that's why I think you're who you are. I think people reach out to people like you and they're like, tell me the thing I need to say in my video, or tell me the thing I need to say in my copy, but I think what I'm so deeply touched by is what they actually need to do is open their heart to loving experiences and being a loving person. I think that's the key to how you've arrived at this relationship with your partner, and but I also think that's how you've arrived where you have professionally. I don't think the two things can be separated.
Yeah. I mean, I think, now when I coach people, it's around helping them get in touch with their why for whatever it is that they're doing, and not just a surface level of why, really deep, meaningful, service-oriented why.
Yeah, that's, I obsess about thinking like love could make the world a better place. And Julie, I knew every time I've been around you, usually on Zoom before this weekend, that I was in the presence of someone who's professionally successful, but you're really like walking evidence that love makes the world a better place. Like there are people still alive. There are children that didn't have to say goodbye to their parents who suicided. There are parents who didn't have to say goodbye to their children because they watched the video of you loving your partner, your then partner, through their transition. And the way hope works is somebody watched that video and they said, wow, if that Julie person can, like, they have a family. Like if they can do it, I can do it. And
Yeah.
they're still walking around on the planet. And that same heart is why you've made 2 commas kind of money in the professional world, because I think so much of the secret to success is love, warmth, and kindness. Like I say constantly, but I don't think I've ever met anybody who embodied it as much as you do. And when we sat down, I did not know that. I learned things, as those of you guys watching the video, I learned things about this person that I did not know until we sat down, and I feel richer for it. So,
Thank you.
Julie, you're incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.